All right. Well, welcome to Elmo Shade. Welcome to our local author chat. My name is Ellen Miles. I'm the Programming and Outreach Coordinator at the Camas Public Library. And thank you so much for joining me this evening for our little interview.
Thanks, Ellen. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a little intro to read about you, and then I just have some really, which I think are fun questions for us to do. And I'm a little under the weather tonight, so I apologize for my voice being a little scratchy, but we'll get through this. So, all right, let me get to my intro here. Elmo Shade currently facilitates mindfulness-based education and leadership development for eMindful based in Orlando, Florida. He earned a certified mindfulness teacher professional, CMTP, designation from the International Mindfulness Teachers Association, IMTA. Elmo has more than 40 years of teaching facilitation experience, including mindfulness-based stress reduction and mindfulness-based leadership in both corporate and higher educational settings. Elmo received his formal mindfulness training from the Center for Mindfulness at UMass Medical Center, Vanderbilt Osher Center for Integrative Medicine, Duke Center for Integrative Medicine, Google's Search Inside Yourself Leadership Development Program, and is a graduate at the Institute of Mindful Leadership. He currently volunteers his spare time with Meals on Wheels in Washougal, Washington. He is the author of Standing on One Leg, Poems of Love, Loss, and the Spaces in Between, published in 2017. Coffee Grinds, Poems and Stories for the Less Than Perfect Soul, 2019, and A Glorious Poetic Rage, which was just published this year by Atmosphere Press in 2021. Last year, I guess, technically. Elmo writes to support his coffee addiction and to keep his sanity intact during the rainy season. Welcome, Elmo.
Yeah, again. Which is now.
Yeah, which is now, exactly. All right, let me get to my first question here. It's really kind of just an easy opener. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you can probably tell by the accent, I'm not from around here. I grew up in the South, spent the last 16 years in Nashville, Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, where I finished a career in executive coaching and mindfulness education, but in the corporate arena. And then in 2019, I decided to uproot and travel 2,400 miles across the country to the state of Washington. And it's been a great ride so far. I love the Pacific Northwest. I am widowed. I have a daughter and two beautiful grandsons that live in Atlanta, Georgia. As you probably know, Georgia just won the national championship, so they're all happy down there in Atlanta land. And the reason that I chose the Pacific Northwest as opposed to, say, Florida, which would have been a lot closer, I have friends, good friends in Seattle. I have family in Vancouver, Washington. Just made perfect sense. And now I have a partner that resides in Beaverton, Oregon, which is just across the Columbia River. So all the pieces of the puzzle are just starting to come together. So that's how I got here.
Excellent. Wonderful. What a great story. Next question. What was it like to write your most recent book, A Glorious Poetic Rage?
Actually, it was a labor of love. My first two books that you mentioned, thanks for mentioning those, Ellen, were both self-published. And that was a learning process. I'm not quite sure I would do that again, but it was definitely a learning process. And I really wanted the credibility, if you will, of being published. And I had a company based out of Texas to contact me after I sent them my manuscript, and they said they would be willing to work with me with a few edits here and there. And we settled on a final copy. And so we actually finished A Glorious Poetic Rage around October or so of 2020, but we wanted to wait until the first of the year So it would have an entire year to be available. And the great thing about the last poetry book was I had been uh, using a poetry coach, and I've been involved in a Zoom poetry group that's based out of Portland for the last year and a half. So to me, the process was a little more fluid, if you will, with the last publication, and it had a specific purpose. It most of the poems are around the pandemic, which we are all familiar with, and also the social unrest that we've been experiencing as a nation. So it had a specific purpose that I was really inspired to continue writing. And the other thing I'll mention is all proceeds, even now, if the book is purchased, all the proceeds do go to Meals on Wheels, which you mentioned is my volunteer organization in Washougal.
That's great. That's great. That's really wonderful of you. Well, you kind of already asked, I was going to ask you a question about how your book got published, but you kind of covered that. So maybe I'll just jump on to my next question, which is, was there anything that surprised you during that whole process?
Good question. Having self-published the first two books, I was not familiar with the process that was totally different from self-publishing. I had multiple contacts in terms of editing and cover design and final scripts, which I did not have when you self-publish. When you self-publish, you usually are just dealing with a cover designer and someone to do your table of contents and that type of thing. So it was much more involved and time consuming, and that was a little surprising. And also, what was surprising was that time doesn't necessarily mean talent. So, like mindfulness, I tell my mindfulness students, you have to do the heavy lifting, and that's no different from writing. You have to write and do your homework, if you will, to make sure that when it goes to print and it goes out to the public, it's the best version of yourself and your work that you can offer.
Okay. I think you froze there just for a half a second. I was like, oh no, we've lost him. But I'm glad that you're not frozen. You're not, can you see me?
Are we back?
I think we're back. Can you see me okay?
I can see you, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gosh. Okay. I don't know what happened there. Well, great. That is great. Do you have any other advice that you would give to aspiring authors who are looking to publish?
Well, not anything probably they have not already heard. The one thing that my coach instilled in me at an early point as I was beginning to develop the skills and and to devote the time, to the writing process, two things, and that is to read voraciously, read as much as you can. And in my situation, it's primarily poetry. I still read fiction and nonfiction, but the majority of what I read are different poets and those that I respect and enjoy reading. And the other thing is to write every day. It doesn't matter what. It's sit down and have a prompt or have an idea, have a visual. It reminded me of the story of WD-40. Most of us have used WD-40 at some point to loosen a screw or to unlock a lock or whatever. But the real story of WD-40, the way they arrived at that name, was that the very first 39 tries of developing that product failed miserably.
Oh.
And it was only on the 40th try that they were able to produce the product, as we all know and use, as WD-40. And writing poetry or fiction or nonfiction is a little bit like that. Is there are going to be setbacks, there are going to be maybe failures or rejections, but you never know. Rejection is just one try closer to being published. And that's probably the best advice I could give is don't give up, read every day, write every day, but love what you're doing.
Great, great advice. All right. Well, I wanted to make sure I asked you what one of your favorite books is to recommend to everyone.
Well, I've actually brought two. I don't know if you can see them. Is that visible
Lower it a little bit, I think.
from your screen?
Lower it. No, I can't really see it very well. Zoom thinks it's a structure or a face or something.
Okay, let me put it up.
No, I
Yeah,
can't.
it is a little blurry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, the first book is a poetry book by Ted Kooser, Kooser. It's called The Poetry Home Repair Manual, and it's a practical advice for beginning poets. If you're beginning and you're starting out and you're just learning, this book really laid a foundation for me 4 or 5 years ago when I was first beginning to write poetry. The other book I would highly recommend, not necessarily about poetry, but just writing, and it's an author that everyone knows. It's Stephen King, and the name of the book is On Writing.
Now that one
And
I have read. I love that one. Yeah.
what I love about it, it's the first half of the book. He talks about his life and how he developed as a high school student in charge of the high school newspaper, and his characterization of all the teachers. And then in the second half of the book, he really gets down into the details of, he
Oh,
calls
oh
them
no, you're
killing
frozen
your
again.
darlings,
Oh,
and,
okay.
and really eliminating all the fluff in the writing so that once a chapter is finished or once a poem is completed, it doesn't have all the auxiliary words in there, that adverbs that aren't necessary. So those two have been tremendous resources for me.
Wonderful. Great. I will check later. I know we have On Writing in the library. I'll check later and see if we have that first one. And if we do, I'll link it into the
Okay,
YouTube video that I'll post later of this.
wonderful.
Yeah. All right. I just have a couple of questions from the audience.
Okay.
David from Vancouver asks, why did you decide to publish your poetry?
Good question. One of the things that if you buy the Poetry Home Repair Manual, in the very first chapter, he says, if you're going to be writing poetry, don't make being published a goal. Write poetry because you love to write poetry, for the love of poetry. Write for yourself. You're not really writing for anyone else. One of the reasons I thought being published became important for me after having self-published 2 books was really credibility. And I have met some tremendous poets that live in Vancouver, that live in Portland, that live in Camas. We have a plethora of really, really talented writers in our area here in Southwest Washington and Oregon. And they're all published. And so in terms of credibility with your peers, in terms of credibility with your audience, I just knew that it was something that became important. Whether it happens again, that's a question I can't answer. But I'm currently in the process of writing a chap book, CHAP, and it's kind of a mini poetry book around instead of 75 or 90 pages. A chapbook's usually 25 or 30, but it's usually focused on one particular theme throughout each poem. And I'm in the process of doing that now, and we'll see, maybe in 2023 we'll get to experience it again.
Great. That's wonderful. All right. Another question from the audience. Marissa from Camas has written in. She says, I write poetry. Do you know of any place where I can share it with an audience?
Ooh, I do. Thank you for the question. And thank you, Ellen Miles, for opening up this opportunity for all of us who are writers, in our hometown of Camas and Washougal and Vancouver. On the third Monday of every month, we meet at the Camas Library. There in downtown Camas, beginning at 6 o'clock, and it's open to writers, poets to come in and read portions of your work to a live audience. Just recently, because of COVID, we're having to revert to a Zoom format like we are doing tonight. And for January and February, because those third Mondays fall on a holiday, we're actually meeting the following Tuesday, both in January and February. So it would be the third Tuesday in both of those months. And then in March, we revert back to the third Monday. But it's a wonderful opportunity to read, to share your work. Or if you just want to come and be an audience member and to meet and greet some folks that love writing and love the tribe of authors, you're welcome to do that as well. There's no charge. We do adhere to COVID protocols when we're in person. And let's just keep our fingers crossed before the year is over. We can revert back to the live audience and to be able to share our work without having to wear a mask.
Yeah, yeah. I was so glad that someone had written in that question because I hoped you were going to talk about our poetry open mic.
Yeah,
And
thank you for the question, Marissa. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. And I'll include the link to our registration as well on the YouTube notes for the video so that people can follow it and sign up. And that's this upcoming Tuesday, isn't
Upcoming
it?
Tuesday, right,
Upcoming
right.
Tuesday. Awesome. All right. Well, so how can people find you and your book and your poetry?
Well, the easiest way is just email me. It's my name, Elmo, ELMO, at Elmo Shade, SHADE, like evening shade, all one word, .com. There are copies in the Camas Library as well as the Washougal Library. There are also copies for purchase on Amazon Books and also Atmosphere Press. And remember, all proceeds, 100% of everything that is spent goes to support Meals on Wheels.
Great. Great. Thank you for that. So, now I wanted to give you an opportunity. Would you like, am I frozen?
You were, you're not
Oh,
now.
oh, good. Whew. Chilly in here, frozen. I was wondering if you would like to read from your book.
Oh, sure. I'd love to. Thank you so
Okay.
much for the opportunity. You know, most of us probably remember the first, 6 months of 2020 when we were just prisoners of our own homes. And do you remember, Ellen, that first time you were able to get out and Camas didn't look like a ghost town? Do you remember that?
I
I
do.
really
I
do
do.
remember that day when you saw cars, you saw people in the shops. People were wearing masks, yes, but there was traffic, there was foot traffic, and we had not seen that, for like 4 or 5 months. So I wrote a poem about that experience and what I observed, and it's actually an ode to Rumi. Rumi was a poet, a Sufi poet, and he actually has a poem called Love Dogs. And so I titled this poem, Love Dogs, an ode to Rumi, about the experience walking in Camas when everything started to open up again. Love Dogs, an ode to Rumi. No longer a ghost town, only tumbleweed connections of suffocating strangers. An Airedale just ate out of my hand after shaking it. Pollen floats through the air like ashes raised from the grave. Yellow tinted windshields pass slowly, unsure of any destination. Unfamiliar sounds in all directions. Pendulums swinging, metronomes ticking, cash registers ringing. Shops slowly awaken from a pandemic sleep sweat. Voices fill once silent streets with laughter. Life as we knew it did not forsake us. Rather, like a dog moaning for its master, it was us yearning for each other. Thank you.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah. All right. Well, again, thank you so very, very much for your time this evening. You know, we're trying to bring more exposure to local authors, and you were right here in Camas, and it was great. So I'll link all of that information in the notes of the YouTube video, and I hope you have a wonderful evening, Elmo.
Thank you, Ellen. And I love the snow behind you. I'm going to have to go get a warm coat on now.
Yeah, this was from December actually at the library.
Yeah, I love that, and hope to see everyone on Zoom Tuesday night, 6 o'clock. Be there.
Sounds good. All right.
Thank you, Ellen.
Bye-bye.
Bye.